really take to become a successful Chief People Officer? That's a question that I hope today's episode is going to help answer. It's part of a new series of HR Coffee Time where I'm speaking to inspiring Chief People Officers and asking each of them the same 9 questions that were chosen and voted on by you, the HR Coffee Time listeners. The idea is to uncover how people get this role, what the job actually involves, and to share practical, honest insights to support you on your own HR leadership journey. And for today's episode, I am so excited to have Kanika Mehra in the hot seat, sharing her experience and advice with us all. Kanika is a successful Chief People Officer who has led HR in mid-sized and large organisations, particularly ones experiencing fast-paced growth and transformation. She has developed people strategies, streamlined processes, and delivered real business value along the way. With over 20 years of global experience, pro-side change management training, and a genuine love of learning, you're about to see how Kanika brings a leadership style to her work that is grounded in curiosity, collaboration, and commercial acumen. I was lucky enough to be introduced to Kanika thanks to my lovely friend, Helen Lombard, who saw a LinkedIn post that I'd shared where I was asking for recommendations for brilliant Chief People Officers to be guests on the show. So a huge thank you, Helen, if you're listening or watching. It was absolutely amazing to meet Kanika and to get to interview her for this podcast. But before we dive in, if we haven't met before, hello, it's great to meet you and to have you here. I'm your host, Faye Wallace, a career and executive coach for HR and people professionals. If you're looking to grow your confidence, your credibility, and your impact in your HR career, you are in exactly the right place. I hope that you enjoy learning from Kanika as much as I did. Let's go ahead and meet her now. Welcome to the show, Kanika. It is so fantastic to have you here.
Thank you, Faye. Equally excited to be here.
Oh, well, that's brilliant to hear. And I am just so excited about hearing all your answers to the questions. So I'm going to dive straight into the very first one, which is, how did you get your first CPO role?
I had been with Amazon for almost 12 years by then, and it had been an amazing journey of growth, both for me myself, professionally and personally. And this incredible opportunity came up through an executive recruiter. And it was an opportunity of a lifetime for me to design the whole foundation of HR, create the people strategy, especially in partnership with a female founder and a CEO at the helm. She had founded the organization almost 17 years ago. And the plus factor was the mission of driving a technology platform and making science open. It was too hard to miss.
So interesting to hear that it was an executive headhunter who approached you about the role. I'd love to ask you a little bit more about that. How did they track you down?
Through LinkedIn, actually. So the executive recruiting firm is also owned by a super cool female. She founded her own organization. When she had approached me initially, I had actually rejected it because at that time I wasn't very keen on leaving Amazon, but she was persistent. And by the third time, I said, okay, what's the harm in a quick informal conversation? The minute she talked about the leader, the CEO, and the organization, and what I would be asked to do, or the candidate would be asked to do, I said, I'm very curious. I am eager to know more. So I jumped straight in.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear. And I just think that's really helpful for people to know, because I'm forever going on about how important LinkedIn is nowadays and the fact that it is worth paying attention to, even if you're not actively looking for a role right now. I'm guessing clearly you had a really good profile on there, which is why they got in touch with you.
She did give me feedback actually on the profile to improve it as well. So it wasn't up to the par according to her, but she was so, I think she was one of those recruiters who is not only just trying to look for a candidate for her company that is retained her, but she was also very keen to know and kind of bring a persona of the candidate to the organization. So my profile, according to her, was good enough in terms of the Amazon experience, in terms of the Citigroup and Microsoft experience because I'm heavily technology background within HR. But she did make some recommendations, which I must say I improved. Made those changes and I improved my profile after that.
So, what were some of the changes she recommended, just for anyone listening who isn't very confident with their LinkedIn profile and could do with some tips?
I think now it might be a little bit more common for people to do it, but the two of them were specifically have a very strong summary right in the beginning, not more than 5 to 10 lines about it. And the summary needs to talk about the business outcomes. It should not be what you are, but it should be what you drove and what you delivered. So I did that feedback, and you can't track the history of my profile, but the summary is a lot better now. And then the second recommendation was there are certain periods of my, so Microsoft versus Citigroup, all of them, I've written just a couple of sentences now. Prior, I'd just written just the basics. So when I joined, when I departed. So she asked me to again drive that. I think it was very important for me to do that because you know how when you've been with a company for 12 years, you don't pay attention to LinkedIn or you don't pay attention to anything in terms of networking. And then when you do start, you realize, oh my God, I should be doing a lot better with this because I am in HR. I teach my candidates and I look for the profile, so I should be doing that. So it was a very good reminder for me as well.
It's a great reminder. And thank you for sharing the tips with us. For anyone listening who's thinking, oh my gosh, LinkedIn, I don't even know where to start, I have got some other episodes that can help you with that. So I'll make sure that I link to those in the show notes for anyone that's going to be useful for. But I better be careful and not just talk to you about how you got that role, because we've got all the other questions to get through. The next question I'd love to move on to is, for you, what has been the biggest difference between being either a head of HR or head of people or HR director and then actually being a chief people officer? For you, what's the difference in the levels?
Large scaling organization with established mechanisms and processes where you drive the strategic decisions that impact the organizational culture and business outcomes versus previously when I was heading AWS for EMEA region. I think the functional expertise or the standard toolkit I was using was similar, but I had the comfort. Not all of my decisions are making the impact for all of the AWS employees, so there was that comfort. However, when that comfort removes itself and the air cover is gone, so to speak, it was very important for me to be very thoughtful, intentional. Ended up using a lot more of data anecdotes from our employees, but also the mechanisms of the business. What does the end customer look at the organization for? What is the culture that you build based on the customer working backwards approach, combination of the employee experience? Does that help?
I think that's incredibly helpful. Absolutely. And I have heard people say to me when they're considering whether to move into a chief people officer role or not, or consider whether to go for it, is a nervousness about the fact that the buck stops with you, that actually it is your decisions. There isn't someone sitting above you who you can turn to. How did you find that? How did you cope with that?
I never actually thought of it that the buck stops with me because I always was confident that if you take any decision based on sound data, accuracy of data that you have been very diligent about, partnered up with the business leaders, and they reconfirm at every single step of the mini decisions after the decision that yes, you're on the right track, you're always going to be making the right decisions. Having said that, for me, I think adaptability is very key. So I've never also forced myself into a corner of this is an irreversible decision. So I've always used the Amazon learning of a two-way door. So some decisions are one-way door where you do have to make sure that once the launch date is confirmed and say made announcement to the public, you can't turn around. You have to do your actions and your do ratio and your speak ratio have to be the same. But lots of decisions are two-way doors. It's like an it's a revolving door. You can move in and you decide, I wish I had more time for making this decision, or I wish I could tweak it slightly. So you come out, you reevaluate, and you adapt, and you relaunch. So perhaps that's where I was always confident of that.
I think that's just so reassuring for anyone listening who has been panicking about that slightly. So it's brilliant to hear your approach and how you were able to keep that confidence in stepping into the role. But coming back to that transition from having moved into this level role, how was it different to what you'd expected once you did move into becoming a chief people officer?
Um, I think for me, there are few things that have been my guiding principles, and that allowed me. The first was you can't tell people how to do things, you have to tell them what to do. And most of the time, they'll surprise you with the results. I'm very famous in my team to say that human beings wake up at first thing in the morning to do their best, give their best shot to the organization. Luckily, none of them wake up and say, let me screw up somebody's life today. I think with that intuition, with that judgment, with that trust that you provide to your organization, I think that for me was a very important guiding principle. The second was definitely hire the best and you can make yourself redundant. So for me, I was able to hire some of the best talent, and that best talent gave me immense, immense confidence that, um, you know, while my role is not going to be needed because they know exactly without the structure of the forceful mechanisms, everything happens in the right manner. And lastly, I think I'm borrowing, I hopefully right from Peter Drucker. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things again and again. And I think that vision of bringing what is my people strategy, then bringing in the leadership and my team on the agreed objectives, it just makes it perhaps flow and you don't feel like, oh my God, what did I step into?
So, from everything you're saying there, it makes me feel like actually there weren't any big surprises when you stepped into the CPO role and that you were really well prepared for it and it was what you were expecting.
I would not say the surprises didn't exist. I think it's my high level of adaptability is where I ended up going. That, like for example, this two at a minutiae level, the surprises were definitely of how much expertise is expected of you at every single meeting, right? So you're not walking in to learn, you're walking in to advise and to be the one to make the decision. And I think that took me a little bit of time to how to accelerate it, but I adapted it to, okay, oh, all right, so that's how it goes. That's how I am expected to show up and to bring and role model to my team as well. The second surprise, again at the minutia level, was the organizations who have never had an HR people strategy prior. You need to spend a lot more time on educating even the basics versus, well, performance management means goal setting, rewarding, training, retention, etc., etc. And then you're done. In your mind, it's too easy, but an organization that has to be brought into that change journey means you have to spend time on educating them. That means you have to go back to the basics more often than not, and you might take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but that's going to be okay.
Can I ask you a little bit about what you were saying about being the expert in the room and making the decisions? Because, again, I know that's something that people can feel very nervous about when they're considering whether they're ready for or whether they want to step into the CPO role. It's a real fear that they have to have the answers to everything when they know deep down it's likely they're not going to know everything.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I've made a lot of mistakes, is the good news, which means I've had a chance to learn from them again and again. Most most human beings are learning, and another concept of a very standard concept in HR that if you're very curious and you are a learner forever, I think all of those are opportunities to learn from. There were definitely days, I won't lie, Faye, that I felt I'm not doing the right job and not delivering the right experiences for our organization. And there were definitely times when you have the typical imposter syndrome of, why was I brought up here? Did I do those right steps? But you have to be very resilient. You have to quickly adapt to that. And you say, you have to have your own mechanisms of, again, going back into data, going back into conversations with your business and reconfirming and recalibrating that truth that your judgment tells you you made the right decision and you move on. And that emotional intelligence combined with your relationship building approach, I think equips the organization with, this leader is going to role model the right calls of judgment. We might go on the wrong path slightly, but we'll navigate back.
So, for someone listening who's thinking, I just don't think I can do it, I don't think I can be in a room where everyone's looking to me for an opinion and I'm not really sure what the right opinion is, what would your advice be to them?
I think my advice would be multifold. First is, it's always better to just be very honest and transparent in the moment and say that I actually don't know the whole answer. I will need to find out. And then, following that, you can do any of the following. You can bring in your expert from your team. You can hire an external vendor for that expert opinion as well. My recommendation would always be, don't be afraid to trust your intuition. Most of the time, given your experience, your judgment is going to navigate you to the right direction. But because the pressure is so high at that moment of, should I just jump in and share the answer, or should I wait to validate and calibrate? I think everyone in the room would appreciate the transparency of, I'm going to come back with a full pros and cons of the decision. So I need to evaluate the data or evaluate input from experts. It could be your own team or someone else.
It's great to hear that advice because I know this is a huge thing that so many people struggle with, this idea that if you're in the top leadership role, you're expected to know the answers to everything instantaneously. But actually, everyone in these senior level roles are humans. And as humans, we
Yes.
just can't possibly
Can't.
know
True.
everything. And even if you know a lot about what's being talked about, oftentimes it's a great idea to go away and reflect on it. But this isn't
Very
supposed to be
true.
me expressing all my ideas. It's us getting to hear yours, Kanika. So I'll wrap up giving my opinion on it
No,
and
I
move
think
us.
you're absolutely a +1 to every single recommendation you made. I think you have to practice everything, practice decisiveness. And I would definitely advise, even if you are unsure of a decision, commit to it. There is literally no decision that cannot be changed. So I would say, I think keep on practicing from small to building to large decisions, and keep on practicing decisiveness. And the confidence you have is because of your experience. You know you are doing the right thing.
So, with that advice to practice decisiveness, is that around all aspects of your life? Are you able to bring that to life a little bit for us as to how you maybe went about doing that or how you'd recommend someone else does it?
I would share an anecdote from my Amazon experience where one of my team members, so we have a very rigorous promotion process where you're required to write a 6-page document to represent in a 360 manner the employee's readiness to be promoted to the next level. So this employee had been working with me in AWS for, I want to say, 6 to 9 months. In my gut, I knew I had hired her below the right level. But I did not have enough data based on her own resume. And the judgment I had was mostly because of the interaction she had with all of my clients and all of our AWS builders, as they were called. Every single one of them would each time be coming back is like, wow, she is impressive. She's just this level, but she's giving me strategic direction. And actually, she's helping me navigate very, very complex, highly ambiguous scenarios. This just doesn't feel right. So that customer feedback came in, 360 feedback from her peers were like, wow, you asked me to mentor her. I'm actually being upward mentored by her. That combination within the 9 months and my own intuition of, I've seen her work, she's delivered every single time. I promoted her within 9 months. I had a robust 6-page document. I made that decision knowing fully well in most of Amazon's promotion history. One of the debatable topics is, why promoting someone within 9 months? They haven't delivered the right business outcomes. And why don't you want to wait for one more year? Usually you would have promotion velocity of about 2 years, etc. I was determined. I was absolutely confident that this is my decision based on full analysis of data combined with my own intuition, which I had the minute I had made her an offer. She was the one promoted to that next level, although there was a conversation that I had with my that and skip level manager who reminded me, is like, I'm going ahead with it because you are so confident, but this is unusual for us to promote somebody within 9 months.
Well, she sounds like she was fantastic, or is fantastic, I should say. And I'm sure she was really appreciative that you decided to make that decision, Kanika.
Yes, she's very, very appreciative. I still mentor her. In fact, I met up with her for coffee a few weeks back as well, and she got promoted again. So the good news is her other manager is also recognizing it. So she's just got that spark. She knows what she wants, and she's very, very strategic, right from a very, very junior approach, but the strategy is not a battlefield only for senior people. She does it extremely, extremely well because she has very strong business and commercial acumen.
Well, it sounds like it won't be long before I'll be able to invite her on the show as well.
Yes, fingers crossed.
There have been so many things that you've already mentioned, Kanika, that I can see have really helped you to succeed as a CPO. But it would be great to hear from you which skills, habits, or practices you feel have been the most help at you thriving in the role, at you succeeding as a CPO.
For me, I think it's a lot of testing and trialing where I was able to develop my own, perhaps, niche as a leader. The most important skills, definitely, for me were being able to identify the right talent, spending time to mentor or upskill that talent, and challenge them to get better, because I'm very proud to say that most of my team members actually didn't realize that they had the potential until I wanted to bet on them and then spend time to bring it out. That for me has been a very key skill. The second skill is definitely in the space of business and commercial acumen. I like working backwards from the customer. What that, in my mind, translates repeatedly on is, I need to know what is the customer, what is the end customer thinking about for a product, for a service, for our technology, because ultimately each and every employee's productivity is focused on that customer. So HR is not going to be removed from that as we are the third step for the customer. We should be equally engaged with that customer and understanding, what do you want from us at Frontiers? What do you want from us at Amazon? What do you want from us? And that want, that desire, lots of research shows, transfers itself into ENPS for our employees, because when they go out and recommend to the customer, I actually want you to come and join Frontiers. I want to recommend it. It is that direct link. So I think the skill set of working backwards from our customer, if that could be a true skill set, a commercial acumen, business acumen, right? Knowing what the end customer wants. And lastly, I think you have to allow your talent to remind you of what they want and adapt to that, what they want from a different time. Because right now we have multiple workforce in our organization, and from the Gen Zs and the millennials, everyone working together, you can't say one size fits all. So you have to be very pragmatic and adapt to that to say, okay, we need to compartmentalize this type of workforce and address this concern of their want versus this, which we either have the luxury to address or not.
Gosh, there's so much I could ask you about from what you've just shared. The point around developing business and commercial acumen, I know, again, that's something that people can feel a bit nervous about or worry that it's an area of development for them. So it was really interesting to hear you talk about that customer focus and understanding the customer and what they're getting and what they want. For someone listening right now who is thinking, oh my goodness, I just don't think I've got it. I feel a bit detached from the customer of our organization. What would your advice be to them on how they can actually go about developing their business acumen and understanding the customer experience more and who that customer is?
Perhaps making it a little bit tactical, I think the first and foremost should definitely be sit in the shoes of the customer. Go down to the lowest level of your organization, the ones who actually perhaps engage with your customers, sit with them for the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, but also have an ongoing mechanism to keep in touch with those customers. If you have sales events, etc., make sure that you attend those or get to get the vibe of the environment, who engages, what questions do they ask, change leadership. I think ultimately during this very volatile, very dynamic environment of ours, we have to accept that the right decisions will always be when you are working backwards from a need which a customer has communicated versus you assume. There's a lot of times that there's data that we hang on to, 2022 data, 2023 data, and then we mention that repeatedly as the basis of an action or a decision. So make sure you are calibrating to that. And the third would be bring them into the journey. The commercial acumen piece for me was very important when we formed the golden triangle with my CFO, CEO, and myself during very key decision-making processes. And we had to understand, how does this HR action translate to employee action and people related action? Because ultimately, if you go back into history, CEOs developed the CFOs to be where they are. And the CEOs who develop the new CHROs, they want that emotional customer intelligence that is driven by data-driven decision making from a CHRO. And if they come back with lots of strong change leadership skills, narrating the right story through communication, they feel a lot more confident that, yes, they develop that business acumen because they're talking like me as a CEO.
The importance of data has come through, or data literacy and digging into the data has come through loud and clear while you're talking, Kanika. I think you've referenced it in almost every single one of your answers so far.
Yeah, it's because Peter Drucker must have drained it in me earlier on in my life. What gets measured gets improved. I don't think I've left it.
For someone listening who's thinking, oh gosh, I'm not confident enough with data. I'm sure I could be better at this, or who might be earlier on in their career and it's not a skill that they've developed yet. It would be really interesting to hear how you've gone about becoming so confident with data and so good at using data, and what your advice would be to anyone who needs to work on that skill.
The remarkable part for my experience with both very large organizations, so I did get spoiled is first and foremost, right? Spoiled with an organization which already has a suite of people, insights, and data that is readily available. In my previous organization, we had this suite of data that you as a manager would see every morning, first thing, about what is the employee satisfaction, job satisfaction, company score, manager satisfaction score. Very transparent, right? So that's one. Now, if the suite of data is very easily available, then it's more important for you to connect the dots of, okay, what does the Glassdoor data say, exit interview data say, people insights, demographics data say, bifurcate those data sets, and then look at what is the narrative or the communication storyline that you need to build. Because without that, I'm just creating lots of Excel spreadsheets and dashboards and then sitting back and saying, okay, this is such a big problem of attrition, versus a storyline which talks about half of our workforce is leaving, 50% of our workforce has left within the last 6 months to XYZ, and here are the reasons why. Well, how did you get that? Well, I had to dig in through these four. At an executive level, our leaders don't have the time to go into, okay, you've shown us great data, you've shown us month over month improvement, but they need to know the why, and they need to know what will you do about the why. And I think the storytelling with that data insight is a lot more where perhaps I enjoyed as well. And because I had it available, I had to build the storyline. I don't know if that helps, Faye.
It's really helpful. I'm now wondering, is the storytelling a technique and a skill that you've developed naturally just while you've been working with the data, or if there are any books you've read or any courses that you've been on that have really helped you develop that?
There's a book about it from David Green, and I was very lucky to actually go and attend one of the workshops where he was a speaker as well. That has helped me. I would say I am on a journey of storytelling. To be honest, I was crap. I was one of those people who was very much, oh, I have this Excel. I have like hundreds of data. I know exactly what is data where. And I perhaps got overconfident because I had the data, but I did not have the insights from it. So I was definitely one of those people a few years back. And I think, not I think, for sure, my own mentors, I'm very lucky and privileged to have a lot of them. My own mentors guided me into that. One of them actually he would literally take the Excel and remove it from the screen and say, okay, so tell me, what is the problem with this? What do you want us to solve? And what is your recommendation? And if I had not done that homework prior to presenting this, oh, lovely dashboard I've created, then I knew I was on the wrong spot. So I think I am on a journey. I haven't learned it, but I found this book. I should check the name of the book and send it to you so you can link it. It's one of the best books I've read from David Green.
I can just imagine everyone, well, I know I'm going to be doing this immediately afterwards, is buying that book. And I have heard of David Green before because he has also got a podcast which focuses on data insights for HR. And you're now making me think I need to listen to more of the episodes.
Yes, actually, the book is called Excellence in People Analytics.
Oh, fantastic. I have been looking for a good book recommendation about people analytics for ages. So that's
There
great,
you go.
Kanika.
I did something valuable today.
Oh, you have done so much that is valuable. I'm immensely grateful. And I know that everyone listening is so grateful as well. And for everyone listening, I'll make sure that I put links to anything that Kanika has referenced in the show notes. So you can go and find it straight away, including that book. But I better move us along, hadn't I? Because I know we've still got a few more questions to get through. Gosh, I could just chat to you all day. So the next question I had for you is, what is the biggest challenge you've experienced as a CPO?
The biggest challenge for me has definitely been in managing change. I have learned by now to accept that I will not always make the right decisions. And like I mentioned earlier, it took me a while to figure out what is a two-way door or a one-way door with those decisions as well. And I can forgive myself because I will screw up royally sometimes without a question. For me, the challenge today is definitely to not beat myself too hard for those and be very clear in making that practicing my own self, the decisiveness that I mentioned earlier. So I think I'm a lot more intentional about that challenge for myself. The second is definitely that not everything is going to be working on alignment between the business and the employee experience. Sometimes you have to make very difficult decisions between what does the business acceleration need versus the employee experience. And that tactically sounds very easy, but when you are in it to make those decisions, your empathetic self, your emotional intelligence would lean towards one area, perhaps, but you have to understand most disruptive organizations did have a short term oh my God experience from employees where they didn't know, are you really seriously telling me this is the right direction when we don't believe so? So sometimes you have to bring in the journey for your employees and for yourself. And I think I've had to learn that on how do I bring myself and my team into the journey of leaning into a business decision. Does that clarify, Faye?
It does. It clarifies it perfectly. And I think it's a challenge that many people will have come up against at some point, whether they're actually at that CPO level or not. It's something that can feel so difficult, can't it? If you know that there are things happening within the organization that
Yes.
aren't going to sit well with everyone, and actually think, this doesn't feel great at all. I wish that we weren't having to do this.
Yes.
So it's interesting hearing you talk about that struggle, because funnily enough, I was asked about it on a different podcast. I was a guest on the Element of Inclusion podcast, and they asked me something about I can't remember what the exact question was. I think it was something like, what's a common misconception about the role? And my answer was that people will often get really angry or horrible about HR and think, oh, they're just awful. They don't care. They've made this decision. It should be all about the people. And I just sometimes wish they could actually see inside the mind and the struggle of the CPO and the entire people or HR team, who are all finding it really hard. They're not thinking, oh, this is great, we're having to make redundancies, or whatever the difficult decision might be that has been decided to be taken in the best interests of the business. There's that real humanity there that I wish more people outside of HR and the people profession could appreciate and see.
Agreed. I think it all depends, right, on what do you want to drive as the end outcome. I firmly believe, I'm not too sure who said it, but innovation and good ideas are anchored on human interaction, conflict, argument, debate, disagreements, and none of them are bad. So if a leadership and an employee, it's not about us versus them attitude. It's the ultimately we're all trying to solve the same thing. But the miss in this is always forgetting to do change management and being very clear and transparent in the communication versus having a hidden agenda in the background. I think for me, as long as you're very clear and honest about it, what needs to happen and why, and this is the time, most human beings adapt to the change after going through their change curve, and they're actually genuinely happier when they have clarity. Clarity of a decision can be very powerful for those type of situations, like you mentioned.
Now that we've been talking about some of the tough side of working in the HR and people profession, it feels like the perfect time to ask you the next question, which is, how do you maintain your well-being, your mental well-being in particular, when you're in such a high priority and demanding role?
Three things I do quite regularly. I have an amazing team at home. My husband, absolutely rock star, supportive, makes it very easy to juggle all the balls at home. Luckily, my kids are much older now, 13 and 15, so they can manage things on their own as well. Super grounded and very independent kids as well. And I think that teamwork at home makes it super, super easy. The second is I have always been known to be super greedy for good talent. I would poach a good talent every single time. I've literally poached a person from a restaurant because she was such an amazing server and I knew she had the customer service skills. Bingo. And I needed those skills in a contact center in Prague. So I made it an offer and I was like, I think you would be perfect. So I am massively greedy for good talent. And once I have the right talent like under me, then for me it feels like I'm enjoying this ride, right? I know exactly who I've hired, what talent, what skills they bring in, and what I need to do as well as a responsible leader with them and a partner with them. Before you're a leader, success is all about growing yourself. And once you become a leader, success is all about growing others, said by, I think, Jack Welch. And that, in my mind, is very much the second anchor for me to do for pretty much anything. I think my team makes it a dream team to work with. And then the last is the business. If you have a massive passion for doing the right things in the world and making an impact, then you wake up in the morning, you're just genuinely excited to go in and make that impact. And that is extremely important for me personally, because I'm very value driven employee. And for me, every single company I've joined and been with has been because their values match with mine at that point of time. And then when the values match, it doesn't feel like you're doing a job. You're just going out to have some fun and create an amazing impact.
When I very first started coaching, and I was predominantly doing career coaching, I used to do quite a lot of career change coaching.
Ah,
And I remember doing the career coach training and just realizing how important that values match was. Because often I'd have someone come to me and say, "Oh, I just don't think I'm in the right job anymore. I think I've had enough of this profession." And then we would go through some exercises. And it would often be when we got to the values one that they would suddenly say, "Oh my gosh, it's not that I'm in the completely wrong profession. I'm in the wrong company. I'm in the
yeah.
wrong organization. Actually, I think that if I was working somewhere where I felt there was a stronger values alignment, I would be so much happier." And so, although they'd actually come for career change coaching, they ended up staying in exactly the same career, but moving somewhere where they had that values alignment. So I've seen firsthand how it really can affect how you're feeling if the values don't match.
Yes. It's the emotional intelligence which any CHR role has to have, while you obviously have to empathize with your employees and create that supportive environment, but you have to take care of it for yourself. So self-awareness is going to drive your emotions and your outlook with your employees as well. So it's quite simple matching value set.
Yeah, but it isn't always obvious, is it? So again,
Yes.
it's great to hear it being talked about. And if anyone's listening thinking, "Oh gosh, I've no idea, how do I figure out what my values are?" Then if you have a copy of the Essential HR Planner, there is a whole section in there to help you. And I also have an earlier episode of HR Coffee Time where I had Zoe Hawkins, who is a coach. She has a coach training business. She elicited my values live in the podcast episode. So you can hop back and listen to that. I'll make sure that I put links to both of those in the show notes as well. As we're coming towards the end of our time together today, I'm really looking forward to hearing what your answers to my final three questions are, Kanika. The next one is, what advice do you have for anyone listening right now who would like to be a CPO one day? So they haven't got to that level already, but they would like to.
Make sure you spend time on gaining the business acumen, commercial acumen. I think the word strategy can scare some people, but a strategic thinking and a strategic mind is simply when you are creating your people strategy aligned with the organization's overall goals and outcomes. And it marries itself very beautifully, organically, because you have that judgment, you have that experience that you have worked so hard for in your own professional career. I think for me, data driven people insights, being able to narrate the storyline with that is a very close second. Like I said, I am learning it myself, and it is a practice. It is a practice. I tell this to my kids all the time. You can practice anything. So keep on practicing what to do with the data, test it with your peer, test it with your leaders, test it in terms of what insights you're getting from that data. Be highly curious with that data driven insights, because that allows you to translate into the exceptional communication skills that you need. And I feel very confident. Most of us in HR do possess very strong communication skills because we interact with such a variety of our unions, ERCs, ERGs, employee base, executives. You interact with so many of them, and you utilize and practice your verbal, written, and interpersonal skills on a daily basis that by definition, you're already the best communicator. You just need to make it greater. The last I would definitely echo is the change leadership. With our current environment where every day a new social media interaction comes up about, are you actually using AI or are you behind AI in HR? There's just so much of pressure that you have to embrace those changes. You should be the first one sitting in with the co-pilots or the chat GPTs to understand, what does this mean? What are all the different types of artificial intelligence that we have? And you want to be ahead of those technology advancements or cultural shifts. And the only way you will be, is go back to my number two, is be curious about it, because you can drive that change leadership better than everyone else, because you are all about the people.
It's fascinating to hear what you see as being those really essential skills. Thank you for sharing them. I'm going to ask you one more thing which relates to someone stepping into the CPO role. So this time we're imagining that someone is about to start their very first CPO role and they're nervous about it. What is one piece of advice that you'd give to them?
Collaboration, building strong relationships with all of your groups of stakeholders, and making sure that you are spending time on understanding the business. When I talk about a collaboration among departments, you're definitely going to be taking on the hat, or what is the people strategy for the organization look like, but you can't do it alone. It always takes a village. So make sure you're bringing in the marketing, the financials, the legal, all of the aspects of the organization to foster that kind of mindset that is, we're all in this together. It's not about this HRO's job to solve for it alone. The second is, I think when you're new, you're always reluctant to perhaps ask some questions because you don't know if it'll sound stupid and silly. My experience, luckily, is that somebody or the other has always been thinking about the same thing, but they just haven't asked because they've been through this experience for 10, 15 years and they've just not questioned it until you come in. And you never know, they might thank you later. Worst comes to worst, you ask the question and they've answered it. No one will ever say, "Oh my God, what a silly question." I haven't heard that in my experiences yet. And then the piece that I was highlighting most was, you are responsible for bridging the gap between the management and the employees. I hate that conversation of us versus them. So I think be very intentional with your language that you start off with. I try and do almost a kind of bullet list of what is going to be my memorandum, what is going to be my approach for you, with you, for this journey that I will partner with each one of you. And that transparency, that clarity is very unifying, because they feel, okay, we know exactly how to deal with her. She will do this, she will not do this. So that clarity helps, and that gives you confidence. At least I was clear with them. This is how I approach things, and this is how I will do them.
So, how do you share that memorandum with them? How are you that explicit and clear about what your approach is going to be?
I think if you go back to my whole interview today, you will hear me saying the same things again and again. So I've written them down. Because I was with Amazon for 12 years, I think the instilling factor was, when you write something, it brings clarity. Not bullet points with PowerPoints, but writing in a document. So most of the time, what I've done is I've written it down and then I've shared it through different channels of, this is how I operate. This is how I evolve. I always tell my team, I love when you say no to me directly. No's are my favorite in every single meeting. In fact, if there's not a single no, then I'm doing something wrong. Either I've scared you guys or say, because once you reach a certain level, employees start becoming quieter about what they want to be transparent about. And I think it's your job to make sure you open up that gate and the window and say, I'm pretty sure somebody or the other has an opinion that is different from mine. So I want a no. I can't remember who was it, but there was an article I read about a leader. I'll try and dig it and find out, where he always shut down the meeting if no one said any no to him. And he always made sure that if he would literally tell you that, go back, come back with a no, we will even delay the project, but I will not move on unless and until it comes back to me with a different opinion, because I'm confident I haven't thought through everything.
I love this idea of looking for the no and encouraging the no's.
Yeah.
That's fantastic to hear. It leaves me with just one question to ask you, which is, are there any courses or qualifications you've taken that were particularly useful for succeeding as a CPO? I know you have mentioned the people analytics one already, but it would be great to know if there are any more.
I love reading, so most of it has come from reading, but the second closest is I have been extremely privileged to have great mentors and managers, and they have taught me significant amount. Luckily, most of them ended up being chief people officers themselves. Hence, their learnings is what I embraced very comfortably. Some of the books I will definitely send it to you, Fabe. I'm not very good at remembering the names. I'm very good at remembering what I learned from something. But one of my favorite female leader, Indra Nooyi, who was the CEO for PepsiCo. She has inspired me significantly in that space of chief people officer, because in her book, she actually funnily mentions she thought HR was not doing anything right. So she did not lie, because HR was not working with her on anything. And she is the one who up-leveled her HR during her tenure. And I thought that example for me was very critical, going back to the golden triangle with working with the CFO. It is the CEOs elevated the CFOs. It's time for the CEOs to elevate the CHROs to that equal setting, because that's where you would also see, I think the boards that you have do not have as many CHROs as yet. And I think that is a very important signal for us to work towards, because that signal helps other grooming work in progress CPOs to be confident that employees are just as important as the financials in that triangle of making it successful.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to getting your book recommendations. Thank you for offering to send them over. And all that leaves me to say at this point is a huge thank you for your time today. It has been amazing chatting to you about your experience as a Chief People Officer. Thank you so much, Kanika.
My pleasure, Faith. Thank you for having me on the podcast. And thank you for my fellow fronton to recommend it as well. I'm very, very humbled by it.
Wasn't Kanika amazing? After our interview, she kindly got in touch to share a few book recommendations. You'll find links to all of them listed in the show notes if you're listening in a podcast app, or you'll also find them just below this video if you're watching the new video version of the podcast on YouTube. The books she recommended are My Life in Full, Work, Family and Our Future by Indra Nooyi, the former CEO of PepsiCo, Data-Driven HR, How to Use Analytics and Metrics to Drive Performance by Bernard Marr, Working Backwards, Insight Stories and Secrets from Inside Amazon by Colin Breyer and Bill Carr. I'd love to know what your favourite part of the interview was. If you're watching on YouTube, please do let me know in the comments below. Or if you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, I'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn. It's always wonderful to get your messages on there. Kanika shared so many helpful and interesting ideas. It's hard to pick just a few highlights, but some of my favourite parts that really stood out to me were her reassurance that you don't need to be the expert in everything, the idea that conflict isn't always a bad thing, that you can practice being more decisive. Her one-way, two-way door analogy for decision-making was such a powerful way to think about how permanent or reversible our choices really are. The fact she shares a written memorandum with her team about how she works, that really reminded me of personal user manuals, which is something I'm a huge fan of and I've spoken about on the show before. And I also loved her story about a mentor who helped her develop her storytelling with data by simply telling her to turn off Excel and asking, What's the problem? What do you want us to solve? What's your recommendation? And I always try to share other HR Coffee Time episodes that tie in with what's being covered. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into some of the topics that were mentioned today, you might want to check out episode 22, which is called How to Handle Conflict at Work, episode 35, Helping Teams Thrive with Personal User Manuals, episode 47, Discovering Your Values to Help Your HR Career. That brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've enjoyed it, please do hit the subscribe or follow button, depending on where you're tuning in. And don't forget, I've got another brilliant Chief People Officer joining me in the next episode, which will be out in 2 weeks' time. I can't wait to share it with you, and I hope you're going to get lots from it.